All right, strap yourselves in. We're going deep today into the world of drones, specifically how they've been used in the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Mhm.
And things really changed on October 7th.
Yeah, it was a real turning point. We're not just talking about futuristic gadgets anymore. Drones are now at the core of this conflict, changing tactics, and bringing up some really tough questions.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig into all of that, the good and the bad, the tactical edge they give, the worries about, the humanitarian side of things, and what this all means in the long run. But first, let's rewind back to October 7th, 2023. Hamas launches this coordinated attack on Israel that, to be honest, I think shocked a lot of people.
And the drones, they weren't just a small part of it. They were key to that initial attack, and that's what makes it so important to understand.
Exactly. Hamas used those drones to knock out surveillance. They hit critical infrastructure. Basically, they were sowing chaos to clear the way for their ground forces.
And they did it by exploiting weaknesses that traditional defenses just, weren't ready for. It was a calculated move, very strategic.
And it shows just how much of an advantage drones can be in a fight. I mean, it's like having eyes in the sky, but with real firepower. You get constant intel, a level of surveillance that you just can't match with old school methods.
Right, and then there's the precision strikes. You can take out specific targets, disrupt enemy operations with, at least in theory, less collateral damage. That's a big deal for ANY military, but especially for a group like Hamas.
Not to mention the cost. Way cheaper than traditional aircraft. No risk to pilots either. And a smaller force can suddenly hit way above its weight class.
Exactly. It's what we call force multiplication. You're basically stretching your capabilities further than you ever could before.
So we know Hamas used these drones effectively on October 7th, but let's get into the details. Their attacks on Israeli infrastructure, that was impressive. They went after communication towers, power generators, the systems that Israel needed to fight back.
And it worked. That disruption caused chaos. It slowed down the Israeli response in those first crucial hours.
And then there were the direct attacks on military targets. Tanks, armored vehicles, key defensive positions. They weren't just using drones to scout, they were using them to directly support their ground attack.
Yeah, it really shows how drones are changing the rules. We used to think of them for surveillance or attack. Now it's everything in between.
I can only imagine what it must have been like for Israeli troops on the ground. That constant threat from above, never knowing when or where the next strike would come from. Talk about psychological warfare.
Absolutely. The psychological impact is huge. It's something we often overlook. But that constant presence, the uncertainty, the fear of sudden attack, it adds a whole new level of stress to the battlefield.
And Hamas was more sophisticated with these drones than a lot of people expected.
Definitely. It was a real display of their technological capabilities, and it made a lot of people rethink what Hamas is capable of. It raises some serious questions for intelligence agencies and military strategists all over the world. If Hamas can do this, what about other groups?
This goes way beyond just this one conflict. We could be looking at a whole new era of warfare.
It's not just a one-off. What we're seeing here could be a fundamental shift in how wars are fought in the 21st century.
It's almost like warfare is being democratized. Smaller groups, even non-state actors, they can get their hands on this technology. It levels the playing field in a way we've never seen.
And that's a huge EG deal for global security. It changes the balance of power. We need to rethink our assumptions about who the players are, how they fight, and what the consequences might be.
Makes you wonder, right? Is traditional military power becoming less important? Can a smaller group with fewer resources still be a real threat?
Yeah, it's a bit unnerving to think about, but we can't just ignore it. So if this tech IS getting easier to get, how do we even start to control it? How do we keep it out of the wrong hands?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's a tough one. The tech's moving so fast, and the laws, the ethics, they're just struggling to keep up. We talked about this a bit earlier, but it's worth digging deeper, I think. The humanitarian side of things, the ethics of using drones in war. Even with these so-called precision strikes, we're still talking about machines that can kill people. And in a conflict like this, where civilians are so close to the fighting, how do we make sure innocent people are safe?
It's a tough balance. Some people argue that drones actually reduce civilian casualties compared to other, less precise weapons. But at the end of the day, anytime you use lethal force, there's always the risk of something going wrong.
And the technology itself is just getting more and more advanced. You got autonomous drones, AI doing the targeting, swarms of drones working together. It's all happening so quickly. It's hard to wrap your head around what it might mean down the road.
Yeah, one of the big worries is this thing called automation bias. Basically, as these systems become more automated, there's a risk that we as humans start to rely on them too much, and that can lead to mistakes, to unintended consequences.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it's happening right now. So how do we, the global community, even begin to deal with this? It can feel pretty overwhelming.
It's a huge challenge, definitely. But I don't think we should just freeze up because it's complex. We need to talk about this more, raise awareness, demand more transparency from governments and militaries.
Right, awareness is key. The more people know about this tech and what it can do, good or bad, the more pressure there'll be to set up some rules, some ethical
And
guidelines.
it's not just governments and military folks. Tech companies, researchers, even everyday people, we all have a role to play in shaping where drone technology goes.
So for our listeners who are following this conflict, who are worried about this stuff, what can they actually do? Where can they go to find out more to get involved?
There are some great organizations out there doing really good work. The International Committee of the Red Cross, for example, they're working on international law for drone warfare, trying to make sure it's used humanely.
And groups like the Center for Civilians in Conflict, they're pushing for more transparency, more accountability. And there's a lot of information online, too, where people can learn about the tech, the different arguments, the different points of view.
And don't underestimate the power of just talking about this stuff. Bring it up with your friends, your family, your coworkers. The more normal these conversations become, the more likely we are to see some real change.
It's all about an informed public, right? People who are engaged and want to understand. And that's really what we're trying to do with this deep dive. Not just give you info, but get you thinking critically about these issues. Maybe even inspire you to take action.
Exactly. The future of drones, it's not set in stone. It's something we can all help shape. And the decisions we make now, they're going to have a huge impact on the world down the line.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with this thought. Think about the world 10 years from now. What do you want drones to be doing in that world? Do we want them mainly as weapons? Or are there other possibilities we should be thinking about?
It's a question worth thinking about for sure, because the technology itself, it's not good or bad. It's a tool. And like any tool, it depends on how we use it. It's up to all of us to decide what kind of future we want.
It's a real crossroads, isn't it? I mean, drones could revolutionize so many things. Think disaster relief, even delivering packages. But then there's that other side, the arms race, autonomous weapons, a future where war is.
Well,
It's scary to even imagine.
and that's exactly why we need to talk about this. Really think about the ethics, the long-term impact, the good and the bad that can come from this technology. We can't just sit back and watch it happen.
You know, what's really struck me is that this isn't just a military thing. It affects so much of our lives. Technology, ethics, how countries interact, even our own personal values.
Oh, absolutely. It's a complex problem, and it needs a complex solution. It's not just for the experts and politicians to figure out. It's on all of us. Citizens, consumers, everyone, we're all going to feel the effects of the choices we make now.
So for those listening who want to dig deeper, who want to get involved, what can they actually do? Where should they start?
Well, there are some fantastic resources online. The Future of Life Institute, for example. They're all about reducing the risks from advanced tech, like AI and autonomous weapons. Their website has tons of info on the dangers of drones and why we need responsible innovation.
And if you're interested in the legal side, the humanitarian side, check out the International Committee of the Red Cross. They've got all sorts of reports and guidelines on how international law applies to drone strikes, stuff like proportionality, making sure you get the right target, accountability. Their website is a great place to learn about the rules of engagement when it comes to drones.
Don't forget about what's happening locally, too. Lots of communities have peace and justice groups that are working on this. They're raising awareness, pushing for policy changes. Go to a meeting, an event. It's a great way to meet like-minded people and get involved at a grassroots level.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, but it's important to remember, you're not alone in this. There are people all over the world working on this, working to make sure drones are used responsibly and ethically. Connect with them, add your voice to theirs. It can make a real difference.
It's all about recognizing that we're all connected, all in this together. We have a responsibility to build a future where technology works for everyone, not against us. It's tough, sure, but we have to do it if we want a safe and just world for future generations.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of drones and the Israel-Hamas conflict. It's been a heavy topic, but a crucial one. Hopefully it's gotten you thinking, maybe even inspired you to take action. Keep those questions coming, stay engaged. You have a voice, and it matters. Until next time, keep exploring.